Grizzly brand bear loads 10 millimeter versus 357 SIG, heavy versus light bear loads. So our 10 millimeter is a 220 grain full metal jacket flat point rated at 1200 feet per second. Our 357 SIG is a 125 grain flat point full metal jacket rated at 1480 feet per second. They actually even have a little bear imprint on the front of that bullet there with the 357 SIG. It's very interesting. But yeah, both are pretty powerful, but a big difference in weight, a 95 grain difference in weight. So I'm wondering if that will make a huge difference if we do kind of a dangerous animal simulation test. Will that extra weight really equate out to having, more penetration, or will a light caliber still kind of do pretty well? So our 10 millimeter, I'm going to use my 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson 610 revolver. The distance from the breech face to the muzzle is equivalent to about a 5.5-inch semi-automatic pistol. So we should get some good velocity in that. Plus we have a very tight cylinder gap, I think 0.002 or 003 with that one. And a 220 grain bullet, covers that cylinder gap for a longer period of time versus lighter rounds. So it should actually still get pretty good velocity in that revolver. Now I'm going to use my 5-inch M&P 40 2.0 with a KKM 357 SIG conversion barrel in that to test the 357 SIG and to get a baseline of comparison to see if these are actually any good compared to something really basic and average. I brought out my 5-inch M&P 9 and I'm going to run some Federal American Eagle 147 grain flat point 9 millimeter in my test to see if these do a lot better than something basic like that. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my dangerous animal 10% clear ballistic gel test. So a lot different setup than what I normally do. Basically what I got going on here is it's a double setup of what I normally do. Normally I do, like for my real world simulation, 4 layers of denim, 3 inches of clear ballistics, a 1/4 inch MDF, and so on. I've doubled up everything. So I got 8 layers of denim that's going to represent our animal hide, 6 inches of clear ballistics to represent like the animal tissue before their big bones, then a full 1/2 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting big animal bones, 32 inches of clear ballistics, and at the back I have another 1/2 inch medium density fiberboard to represent the opposite side of a large animal's big bones, and then a little more clear ballistics. So we'll see how the 9 millimeter does, and then we'll see if these better cartridges, 10 millimeter and 357 SIG, do a lot better than that. And then of course I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy I could get on a charging Grizzly. So let's get started with this test. All right, I'll run our baseline cartridge here, our 9 millimeter American Eagle 147 grain flat point. This is rated at 1,000 feet per second. Let's see if I get my 5-inch M&P here. See how close I get to 1,000 feet per second. About 5 yards from that target. $1,092. 1,075. 1,071. 1,071. 1,076. So surprisingly very powerful and very consistent for just some target ammo. I'm really surprised there. Now we'll move on to the ammo we're really testing today. Our bear loads. Grizzly brand bear loads. 220 grain full metal jacket flat point rated at 1,200 feet per second. I did notice that even though these are all Starline brass, most of these won't hold in the moon clips with this revolver, which is kind of interesting. They, normal rounds, I've tested a lot of rounds and I don't have a problem with them. It's just these particular loads. So let's see what we get with our 10 millimeter, see how close we get to that 1,200 feet per second it's rated at. $11.06. $11.04. $11.02. $10.98. $10.94. So I am impressed because I think that's like a 12 feet per second extreme spread, but nowhere near that rate of velocity. And I'm going to tell you, it's not this revolver and it's not cylinder gap, because I test plenty of rounds where I get pretty similar, almost the same, if not more than a lot of 5-inch semi-autos. So getting 100 feet per second less in a revolver of the .002 gap 220 grain bullet, which is long and seals that gap even on top of that, and then equivalent to about a 5.5 inch semi-auto. Yeah, I'm just gonna say that ammo's loaded weaker than what they claim it is. So our 357 SIG here, we were rated at 1480 feet per second, so that's moving along. Let's see how close I get to 1480 with my 357 SIG here, conversion barrel KKM. So see how close we get to 1480 feet per second, 357 SIG. 1565. 1566. 1584. 1557. Let me run one more. 1577. So very consistent. I'm liking that consistency. You know, we're not seeing these really wild spreads, and it is very powerful. And on top of that, there's like no recoil. So, I mean, there's recoil, but it's not really any more than 45 auto with a plus P or something like that. It's not that bad. So, let's do our dangerous animal ballistic gel test here and see how these all compare. All right, so I'm going to do a couple shots of each caliber into this gel. A lot of people always ask, why am I so close to the gel? And the reason why is because when I do gel tests, I shoot more than one round. So you really want to space those apart so you're not impacting other bullets. It's very easy to be off by an inch and then impact another bullet with another shot. So I would rather, you know, be within a couple feet and accept the fact that the velocity might be, you know, just ever so slightly faster to be able to get more accurate, you know, shots placed in that gel. So let's see what we get with our flat point 9mm here. Dangerous animal test. Let's go take a look. Let me do one more because that was weird. Now let's go take a look. So those first two shots, they yawed out the block to the side with two shots. You can see one bullet sitting there. That's just because it, you know, it's just sitting there. It came out the block and then is up against the back side of that device I have going on here. So let me grab my measuring tape. I did not think this was going to go as far as it went. Did not think this at all. So this has a lot of penetration for a 9mm, a lot. And we went through 2 half-inch rib simulations. So this is just massive here. And we add to that 36 inches, we got about another, I know Parallax will throw this off quite a bit, but we got about another 8.5 inches. So, yeah, like 44.5 inches of penetration. But that's going through a full inch of MDF. So you got to understand, that is a lot of penetration. That is a lot. So would I use this round against a dangerous bear that was coming at me? You bet I would if that's all I had, because that's impressive. So let's move on and see how these better calibers, these better loadings, I should say, compare. All right, 10mm auto, a lot more bullet weight. A lot of people say in theory these things are going to penetrate more than anything else because of that bullet weight and the flat nose. We'll see. 10mm. Let's go take a look. All right, so we had some sporadic performance with that. This is why I do 2 shots, because unlike hollow points that tend to expand and do, you know, similar things, when you're talking full metal jackets that have a tendency to want to tumble sometimes, you'll often see completely different things with different shots. And we can tell with this first shot, we were tumbling quite a bit. and it going through sideways caused that damage, as where the second shot with it just went straight through. So if we look at the penetration of that first one, we only went through a 1/2 inch MDF, right about 27 inches of penetration. So the 9mm easily beat the 10mm. Now when we look at the second shot, it stopped in the actual back rib simulation. So it still went pretty deep, but we went to about 40 inches total. So that's good, but considering that what we just saw with the 9mm, that's really not good. So let's hit it with the 357 SIG now and see how that does. All right, 357 SIG, the lightest bullet of the bunch, but I think energy-wise, I think it was the most powerful. I didn't do the numbers yet, but I think it was more powerful than that 10mm. So a lot of power, but not a lot of mass. 357 SIG. Let's see what this does. I moved that whole thing. Let me set that back up and hit it again. All right, let's hit it again, more center. 357 SIG. Let's go take a look. All right, so yeah, that did a lot of damage. Difference here between all of these. So the first one, we started yawing and it went to a similar depth of that first 10mm. So it went down, hit the bottom of the shelf. I wasn't expecting to see that. Our second shot went a little bit further, but not quite as far as that second 10mm shot. So sporadic results here. So with our first 357 SIG, it's really hard to count this because it bounced off that shelf, but we are at, roughly 26 inches. Now that second one, it went in a straighter line, but it also caused a ton of damage. So we're right here at about really close to 34 inches. So looking at this, I can do kind of an overview here. The one that went the furthest was the 9mm. The 10mm was really disappointing, but the second shot went pretty far, but there's not a lot of damage in there except for when it tumbled. Our 357 SIG, on the other hand, kind of split the difference. There was a lot of damage in there, even when it's going straight, and then it penetrated pretty good. So very surprising results. And it's really hard to call this as a better bear load, one caliber versus another, based on penetration alone, because diameter will matter. Obviously a 40 caliber bullet is going to do more tissue damage than 9mm size bullets, like with these 9mm and 357 SIG pistols. But there also has a good chance of slowing down a little bit faster because there's a little more friction going on there and going through the target. So interesting test overall. I really cannot come to a conclusion when it comes to shooting a bear or something like this, because I'm out of my league when it comes to dangerous animals and understanding all of that. But I can say that for penetration, the 9mm and it did better than the 10mm and the 357 SIG for penetration, which is something I definitely was not expecting to see. But I would say overall, the best performer would be the 357 SIG, because it just seemed like I put a ton of damage in there. So I would say if you had to shoot something that wasn't super huge, maybe black bear, cougar, something that's dangerous, I think our 357 SIG would be the best option. If you had to shoot a bear, big old bear, I would still say that even though in this test the 10mm doesn't look that impressive, I think if you landed a bunch of them, it would actually probably do the best. But 9mm out penetrating both of these is kind of eye-opening. So let's pull these out of the block. I'll take a close-up look at them, these bullets, and then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through our dangerous animal simulation. So here's our 9mm to start with. And a 147 grain 9mm is a long bullet, but there's virtually no change or deformation to these bullets. Very thick jacket, very long bullets. So not much to learn by looking at that. Now we'll look at our 10mm here. 10mm is a lot bigger bullet than that 9. And pretty sturdy bullets. I see, again, essentially no deformation to those bullets. These appear to be a total metal jacket. That's more of a plated style bullet, as where our full metal jackets generally have a exposed base. A total metal jacket goes all the way around it, but usually the jacket's thinner. But still, with the amount of energy it's working with, it didn't really deform those bullets or do much to them. Now our 357 SIGs here. These have a cool little bear print on them. These actually hit hard enough that there is significant deformation. These are full metal jackets again. The nose crushed down quite a bit, and that bear print is less visible. So that hit with enough force to really change those bullets a little bit. If we compare it to the 9mm here, similar size, similar shape ogive and everything, but you can see how, the 9mm, nothing really happened to it. These are both full metal jackets. But with that 357 SIG, that wanted to crush down a little bit there. So just a very interesting results overall. Our 10mm, it just slips through the target pretty easily without deforming the bullet much, but it can yaw quite a bit, quite easily. And I think the same thing was happening with this, where we started to yaw a couple times, and one of those shots went really deep and the other one didn't so much, and then left the block. With this, these started to yaw and then it bounced off the shelf, and then the other one didn't. So this acts more like a really powerful 9mm, which it is, when it hits the target. So very interesting results here. So I'm going to say our 357 SIG did the best. Our 10mm probably did second best. But as far as penetration goes, our 9mm did the best, which is really very surprising. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I'm not going to be able to realistically simulate, an animal attacking me or anything like that with the target coming at me. But that size of that target's roughly the size of the big frontal area of a bear. 14 yards from the target. I guess I'm simulating if it started at 25 yards and it got within 14 yards of me. But really, I'm just shooting at the target, so not a perfect comparison here. But I just want to see what the shootability is with these. If I had to shoot at something that big, as fast as I think I could hit the target. So 9mm. Empty these out and see how these things will do. All right, only had 4 rounds in there. And it didn't do too bad, honestly. Let's see what I can do with our 10mm here. I don't know how I'm missing, to be honest. I think I'm just firing over the target, and I'm not that good with this particular revolver, so that's probably it. Now, our 357 SIG. Let's see what I can do with this thing. Alright, so that's got a lot more recoil than the 9mm, but not substantially more. Like I said, it's probably like a 45 ACP plus P. That's about how hard it is to control. So I would say the balance of the 357 SIG kind of splits the difference the same way it did in our ballistic gel testing. The easiest to hit the target with was the 9mm. This was only slightly more difficult to hit the target with, but it does a lot more damage. And our 10mm, I was the most disappointed in the gel test, and I'm also the most disappointed in my ability to hit the target. So Let me back it up and see how these two calibers, the 357 SIG and the 10 millimeter, would do kind of as de facto hunting rounds. See if I can just hit the target from 75 yards for fun. All right, 75 yards from the target, so I'm just going to do my best to hit the target as if I were trying to take game at 75 yards or 225 feet away. So I'm going to do single action with their 10 millimeter because that'll give me the best chance to hit the target. So 10 millimeter, 75 yards. Just going to start off aiming center mass. And that hit right where I aimed. Got one more round here to fill this back up. Keep going. That hits that really hard. I don't know how I missed that last one, but you know, it's funny because this round isn't necessarily that loud. It's, you know, it sounds very subsonic, and I think we were just barely subsonic out of that revolver. So, you know, it's not that loud, but it hits that steel. It hits really hard, like a sledgehammer. 357 SIG. Now this is going to move fast enough that I'm not going to be able to really hear it very well because it's super fast. So let's see how you do with our 357 SIG. Alright, so that one took very little effort for me to be able to hit with it. And part of that is that there is virtually no flinch going on with this because the recoil on this is very, very low. You know, I say it's like a 45 Auto Plus P, and it kind of is, but it's actually a little bit less than that, I would say. It really is closer to if you had a really warm 40 Smith & Wesson. Just very, very little recoil. So it's very easy to hit the target with this. So between these two, I'm going to say I think that the 357 SIG makes more sense as a bare load and, you know, for handguns. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that the 357 SIG is going to be more effective than the 10 millimeter against a large, dangerous animal. I'm just saying that overall, it seems like it's nearly as effective, but a lot easier to shoot. And you got to remember, this thing is like a 27-ounce pistol, and there's almost no recoil. This thing weighs like, I don't know, 45 ounces or something like that. And even in that, it just seems like a lot of jolting recoil. So if you were to put that in, let's say, the M&P 10 millimeter pistol, which is similar in size, I think it's a little heavier, but similar in size, that's gonna be a lot more recoil, and you're not really getting any more energy. The only thing you're really getting more of is bullet mass. So look at these. The biggest thing that stands out, obviously, is how did a cheap American Eagle 9mm that I bought for, I don't know, $14.97 for a box of that, outperform expensive bear ammo? And I think it did, and it didn't outperform it. It did definitely penetrate the most. But, you know, the energy that we're working with that would likely be less effective on something that's very dangerous coming at you. But it is definitely, there's enough penetration to hit something vital. So theoretically, if you had a lot of these rounds, I think you would do quite well. At least I have a 5-inch pistol or a Glock 17 or something like that. I think you would do quite well against something like that that's trying to attack you. But from the real world situations that I've heard of people in Alaska that had to use a 9mm, generally it involves using most of the rounds in the magazine. As we're with 10mm, you know, it takes less rounds from some of the reports I've heard. I've never really heard any reports about 357 SIG, but I would say the 357 SIG splits the difference, and it would be my choice for a bear defense load. Maybe not this particular round or bullet weight, but I'm going to say for a 125 grain, it's doing good for that amount of weight there. As where with the 10 millimeter, while it did fine, I just feel like you could find something better in that recoil range that would perform better. You know, I might suspect like a 255 grain 45 auto would do better than this 10 millimeter. And I'm not trying to hate on the 10 millimeter. I think it's a good cartridge. That's why I purchased a really expensive revolver in 10 millimeter. But anyways, very interesting results. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.